Alhamdulillah wahda, wassalatu wassalamu ala man la nabiyya ba'da. Insha'Allah, in our series Creed of the Rightly Guided, we will be doing our next aqidah, and that is imagination and intellect cannot comprehend Allah the Exalted. Imagination and intellect cannot comprehend Allah the Exalted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَعْلَمُ مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمَا خَلْفَهُمْ وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِهِ عِلْمًا. He knows what is in front of them and what is behind them, and they do not encompass him with their knowledge. Surah Taha, verse 110. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything, and we are not able to fully comprehend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a complete understanding of the creation in all aspects to its entirety. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands every single detail of the creation, but creation is not able to fully comprehend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, how can we comprehend something? What are the ways we use for comprehension or fully understand something? So there are two methods. Number one is waham, and that is a false imagination, which means that we make up our own thoughts. We give shape to something by our own understanding. They're not true, they're not real, but we have made them up. We have, in a sense, fabricated them. Like, for example, we read novels, right? The creator, the heroes, or the superheroes, or whatever it may be, whatever they are imaginary. They're not real, right? They're made up. So that's called waham, right? Number two is we use faham, and that is correct understanding. So let's just say the biology books, right, or science books, they're showing us diagrams and they're showing us pictures. Those are not necessarily, they're not like a novel, right? There's a reality to it. So there are two methods. We form a shape, or we give a picture, or we make a picture, right? So there are two methods of doing that. What we understand is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is such that there's no way for us to fully comprehend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we can come up with a design that by reading the sifats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all powerful. Okay, so we're gonna try to make something all powerful, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, he's not limited time and space, so I'm gonna try to create a wave because we cannot give him shape. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees, but he doesn't have eyes, so I'm just going to put a, just leave the space empty to show as if that's the eye, So there's no way. I mean, no matter how much we try, false imagination means waham, trying to create the greatest superhero, it's not possible. No matter how much we try, by reading the sifats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we still can't, because there's no such thing as God in the world. Means, what I mean by no such thing as God, not saying there's no God, what I mean is there's no one in the world who has the attributes of God or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if there's no example, how can we make it? I can make it, right, if there was an example. So even if I'm trying to make it a false imagination, I still need something, right? Like when someone is writing a novel or drawing the superhero, he still has a example. For example, he's trying to make him a human being, so, but that superhero is a very strong human being. So he will still be able to give the shape of a human being and just give him a lot of muscles or anything else. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no example. So no matter how much we try, it is impossible to come up with the shape and form of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means there is no way, there's no possibility for anyone to say, I have fully understood Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into its entirety, to its every single detail. Then the question might come in our minds that if I cannot comprehend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how do I imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What do I think? How can I, think of that being or that deity when I'm worshiping, when I'm praying? What do I think about? Usually, naturally when I'm talking to someone or writing something, there's thoughts in my mind, right? That's just natural. I'm not sitting and not thinking nothing, right? There's always going to be a thought in my mind. If I'm talking about my friend, you know, his picture, his form, his shape, his face, it will come into mind. I'm talking about a pencil, right? I think about a pencil. I think about a pen. I write it. Every time I mention something, a type of a picture, whatever it may be, it does come in my mind. So on if I cannot comprehend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and there's no example, then what do I do? How do I imagine Allah? How can I not imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How can I worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not have an imagination of Him? Right? So the answer to that is imagine being watched. For example, I'm sitting in a room and I know, let's say office or anything, and there's cameras. Or I'm shopping, I'm shopping and in that shop there's no one there. No person, no cashier. The only thing I see is products. I see, scan and go, and I see cameras. So there's no person there and there's no one around. I still will not steal. Why? Because I know I am being watched. So just that feeling of being watched is what we should have about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That I am being watched by something, right? Just like I said, we'll have a consciousness of being watched. That doesn't necessarily mean I have to know who's watching me. The fact that I know I'm being watched is sufficient to prevent me from doing wrong or to make sure I do right. The same thing here with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have to imagine, or we don't have to, but of course when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's no form nor no shape. Then what do? I feel or I imagine that I am being watched by someone, and that would be sufficient. So summary is, we cannot fully comprehend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any way, whether it's waham, whether it's faham, false imagination, correct understanding. It is impossible. Why? Because there is no example of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's beyond our understanding. Number two, we think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by imagining being watched, and that would be sufficient. Just like for when we go, there's cameras, we know we're being watched. Similarly, we are being watched at all times by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the correct understanding, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to convey the true message of Islam. Subhanahu bihamdi, subhanakallah bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.